Welcome to WJ Live, where we equip listeners with the truth. My name is Joe Setyan, Deputy Managing Editor for the Western Journal. Today, I'll be joined by George Upper, Josh Manning, and Andrew J. Shasha. We'll talk about Tony Bobulinski's interview with Tucker Carlson, how the Girl Scouts are the latest organization to bow to the left, and how Christians should navigate the election, and what will happen to the Republican Party if Trump doesn't win.
So Monday, we saw the end of the Amy Coney Barrett proceedings in the Senate. We saw that Amy Coney Barrett was confirmed from U.S. Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals judge to Supreme Court justice. She was sworn in doubly, first on Monday night by the president and then again by Chief Justice Roberts the following day. So she is on the court. And that means that the drama has actually probably just started, because now we're going to have national outrage for however long she sits on the court. Indefinitely, period.
And about anything she does.
Yes,
like taking
decision.
an office.
Yeah. Or adopting a child.
And so we luckily have a couple people who have been surprisingly bold. One group in particular being the Girl Scouts of America, who yesterday at around 1 p.m. posted a wonderful tweet. We'll show you guys the tweet at home. They wrote, "Congratulations, Amy Coney Barrett, on becoming the 5th woman appointed to the Supreme Court since its inception in 1789. They then had pictures of Sandra Day O'Connor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Amy Coney Barrett. The five of them, on that post. Outrage, just absolute outrage ensued as a result of that very, very simple, nonpartisan post. They had a little disclaimer on the following tweet, just saying, "It's not a red or blue issue. We're Girl Scout Green. We support any feminist endeavor." And you would think that
should do it.
Any woman, being the 5th woman out of 114 justices appointed to the Supreme Court, actually confirmed to the Supreme Court, would be a massive, massive event for women in this country. But because it was a conservative woman, of course, that's just not the case. So, absolute outrage. We had a bunch of, unsurprisingly, left-wing men, the white cis men that you hear about, getting online and pretty much complaining about Amy Coney Barrett in the comments, which is, I think, hilarious given the no uterus, no opinion thought, but that's beside the point. So
sounds very sexist to me.
Exactly. And 3 hours later, we have the tweet taken down and an apology from the Girl Scouts of America. They write, "Earlier today, we shared a post highlighting the 5 women who have been appointed to the Supreme Court. It was quickly viewed as a political and partisan statement, which was not our intent, and we have removed the post. Girl Scouts of the USA is a non-political, non-partisan organization. We are neither red nor blue, but Girl Scout Green. We are here to lift up girls and women," which is why they deleted the post with, again, a wonderful female leader in this country.
Right.
Just making an absolutely fantastic career endeavor or achievement. Of course, they didn't take down a post from last March where they had the first 4 female justices, O'Connor, Ginsburg, Kagan, and Sotomayor, with almost identical language and a link to them talking about, or to an article talking about their achievements. So what I want to ask you guys is this kind of thing evidence of just how outsized the left-wing influence in the culture is? Because when we see things like this, it's never a right-wing mob canceling. Like, yes, we've seen boycotts of the NFL, but the NFL
Yeah, but that's, I'm not going to watch.
I'm not
you
going to watch. Not you need to take this down. So is this are events like this evidence of that?
Yes. They're evidence of a couple of things, I think. One is that one of the foundational differences between conservatism and liberalism is the mindset of individuality versus collectivism. So people on the right, as a general rule, are going to be worse at boycotts, at collective endeavors like that, because we think as individuals. We don't think of ourselves as part of a mob. So that's part of it. The left is just geared. Their DNA is such that they're just geared for this kind of action better. But it's more foundational than that, in my opinion. In the tweet in which the GSA took down the original tweet, they said that we made this tweet and it was viewed as such, right? And it's not what it was intended. And so what they've decided is that how people interpret their speech is more important to them than what they meant to say in the first place. That is an extremely leftist position to take. It's been the idea of authorial intent, the idea that what an author, what a speaker means is what something actually does mean, has been under attack in this country for 70 years. And it's a classic liberal grift, Joe. Because it undermines so much of what the right stands for. It undermines the Bible. What does the Bible mean? Well, what does it mean to you? Well, who cares what it means to you? You didn't write it. But that's not what liberals would say. What does it mean to you is what liberals judge the Bible by. What does the Constitution mean? Well, what does it mean to you?
Postmodernity. Postmodernity.
Yeah, it's postmodernity. That's right. There's no foundational truth on which to judge any of these things.
Which is funny, though, because, the left is all about subjective truth, not objective truth, except when they think something is a certain way, they need everyone else to take it, which means they are saying what
this
is the
objectively
truth.
true.
Right. It's just their truth.
It's
which
subjective
doesn't make
until
any
it's
sense.
their objective truth.
Right.
Let me, I agree 100% with what George said. That
that's
being
wise of you, Joe.
said, I don't think that, thankfully, I do not think this is evidence of the left's, the left's cultural superiority or their kind of vision of them thinking, like, basically their, what they, that the I can't think
Cultural
of the word.
hegemony.
Cultural hegemony.
Wow.
Thank you,
Gotcha.
Josh.
I wouldn't have
That's
thought
a
of
Harvard-
that either.
that's a Harvard man,
Massive.
ladies and
Well, I
gentlemen.
had time to think about
I would
it.
have had
while
trouble
you were-
coming up
thing
with that
is-
phrase myself.
No one is actually upset at this tweet except leftist activists who have outsized influence. Influence is actually the word I was looking for on Twitter. So whenever we have these cancel culture events, no one's actually mad. Normal people
That's right.
Yes.
could not care. They could not give a flip about it. It's just the leftists. And the leftists make it seem, especially on Twitter, because of the leftist echo chamber there, like they represent all of America's beliefs. And they don't. No one cares. No one
you're right,
in
right.
America cares except the left. But they've somehow convinced these companies that their view is what all the consumers and all the Girl Scouts and all the parents and whoever's involved in the Girl Scouts in any way, they've convinced the organization that the left's view is everyone's view, which is just not true because nobody cares.
And most of the people on the left claiming to be outraged aren't actually outraged.
No, it's all fake outrage.
Yeah, they see
Yes.
this as an opportunity to make a rhetorical point, and they know that in general people don't like other people to be mad at them.
Exactly.
Right. Most of us don't like it when other people are mad at them. Josh kind of thrives on it, but most people are hesitant. And so they use that as a tool. That's all that is. It's a rhetorical tool. If I act like I'm mad, people are more likely to respond the way I want them to. It's just manipulation.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of cancel culture is that nobody's actually mad about this stuff. Yeah. It's just all fake outrage.
And so what I want to get at then in my last question.
Unlike Joe's outrage right now.
Which
I'm
is
actually
real.
outraged
100%.
now.
I am out.
I want to cancel the leftist outrage people.
I'm with that decision. So what I want to get at, Josh, then is why is it that these companies haven't learned that standing by a principle or a value or a statement is the far superior decision in the modern marketplace? Because you have essentially now a climate in which you take a stand for something and you tick off one side.
Yeah.
Then you recognize and you course correct wildly in the opposite direction, and you tick off the side that you just pleased.
Yeah.
And so now no one's happy. Why is no one learning from this?
Well, I think to learn complex lessons, sometimes you have to have some amount of courage to face things. I imagine it's hard to learn. I think it's probably hard to learn some things if you're incredibly fearful and if you're not willing to take a risk. And so few of these companies are willing to just weather the storm for a couple of days, or to come out and just, instead of weathering the storm and just kind of kind of hunkering down and just waiting for it to go away, doubling down on it and saying, in this case, no, it's significant. We're the Girl Scouts of America. We think achievements by women are important. This is a significant achievement by a woman. We're going to stand by this. And the left ultimately, I think, can't really do anything in the face of that. The shame thing only works if you're willing to admit to being shamed,
Yes.
or if you're
That's right.
willing to act like you're shamed. That's one of the things I think that the media despises about Trump is there's zero chance of his coming out and making a mea culpa.
Yes.
And that's what they count on. They count on
Right.
blood in the water. And there's zero chance of
No.
him ever doing that. So one of the tools that they use, you make the accusation, you turn up the pressure on the person. The person then comes out and says, well, if I did something wrong, I'm very sorry. Then the media just hammers, admits that he may have done something wrong, this, that, and the other. And I think these companies are cowardly. I think CEOs in general are not ideological people. They're technocratic people, and they probably want to get on to the business of running their business, and so do whatever's necessary. But Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, he says, double down.
Yeah.
Every time they come after me, I double my ad buy.
Yeah.
And he's doing great business.
Yeah.
And I think that points to another foundational difference here, Josh, which is the negativity of the left versus the positivity of the right. Mike Lindell's a good example of that, and I think the whole Goya explosion was one also, where
Great point.
when the left said, no, cancel them, and the right said, not so fast.
Yeah.
But the right didn't organize some big movement to go buy Goya products, right?
They did, to
They
an
just
extent.
went
Just
out and
happened
bought them.
organically.
Yeah. They
No,
just
I-
went out and bought them, yeah.
I think it happened pretty
No,
organically.
it was organically, but I think it was still a
Right.
movement.
I think
to buy Goya.
prior to that, I think I bought 2 cans of Goya black beans in my life. And when that all happened, I went out and I bought pretty much everything that was in the store. Now, this is the middle of COVID. There wasn't all that much in the store. But I bought what was there just out of because I wanted to positively support somebody who stood for some things that I also stood for.
Yeah.
And the left doesn't know how to do that. The left doesn't positively stand for things as a general rule. They go negative with it.
Or said otherwise, they destroy and we build.
Yes.
They destroy what they don't like. We build what we do like.
Yes.
Right.
And that is a fundamental difference.
Well, yeah, it
between
goes.
us.
You could take that all the way back to whether are we culture of life people or culture of death people. I mean, it's a reflection of all of that. So, in the interest of time, we need to move on from there. And I've got about a minute to cover what I wanted to cover today, but we're going to do it because this is such a fundamental story, such an important story of the continuation of really what started as a New York Post story regarding Hunter Biden's emails, which has now evolved with revelations from Bobulinski, with Tucker Carlson. If you haven't seen Tucker Carlson in the past couple of nights, you need to go find that coverage and watch it. This is
on the Western Journal.
this is a relatively complex story. Tucker does a pretty good job of breaking it down, but it's not something that you're going to pick up in a 5-minute story. It needs to be read and understood. One way to do that is follow Molly Hemingway. Joe's going to call this a grift on Twitter. Molly Hemingway, she's one of my favorite writers anyway. She's at the Federalist. If you don't follow her on Twitter, you should. You should follow us first, the Western Journal, and then follow her second. But she has just a way of summarizing stories very, very well. And I don't know if she just sits down, watch Tucker, and just kind of tweets through it. That's how it reads to me. But she captures, like in bullet point format, everything that's happening in this story. And I wanted to give just a couple of examples of some of the things she said about Bobulinski's story last night, which was, so she quotes Tucker, Bobulinski is an unusually credible witness. I have to agree with that. Now I can't verify all that he's saying, but he comes across as somebody who's telling the truth and who doesn't have a motivation to do otherwise, which is important, I think. And an extremely important point made last night was we don't know what Joe Biden's version of the story is because nobody in America's vast media landscape have pressed him. And that's 100% accurate. Nobody's asking him, perhaps because nobody wants to know the answer. This really reminds me, again, 2 days ago on this show, I said, are we reliving 2016? Is 2020 another version of the 2016 election? The behavior by the establishment media certainly helped elect Trump in 2016. We had this whole Hillary Clinton email scandal. We had a refusal for the most part, on the left from the establishment media to cover that story. And so we had the Streisand effect going on. We had that story was amplified in other media, in non-traditional media, on social media, because of at least a perceived reluctance from the establishment media to cover that story. We have exactly the same thing happening today. And now pundits are talking about how primaries should have weeded Hillary Clinton out in 2016, but they didn't because they didn't want to touch her. Primaries should have weeded Joe Biden as a weak, damaged, flawed candidate out during the 2020 election, but they didn't because nobody wanted to be perceived as the Jim Comey of 2016 torpedoing Hillary Clinton. Everybody wanted to give him that pass. And now these things are coming to light. The question, one question I have for you guys is, does this help Trump again this year? Does this story coming out at this time, and particularly the establishment refusal to discuss it, establishment politicians, establishment media refusal to discuss this, does that help Trump by once again highlighting the contrast between Donald Trump as an outsider and the swamp?
So if the election is going to be as close as some people think,
Excuse me.
If the election is going to be as close as some people think, then it truly may help Trump because it won't. I mean, we have this discussion all the time. I don't think it's going to do a whole lot for folks who are on the far left. Folks who are in the middle, undecided, still trying to figure it out. I do think this looks very, very fishy for there to be an enormous issue like this hanging over all of our heads and for the media not to address it and to be so clearly not interested in addressing it, big tech censoring it and all of those things. If the election is going to be really close, then I think it does matter.
You think it's enough to maybe tip it?
I think it could be enough to tip it.
I've said,
but I don't know. But I think watch for November 1st and see before it's at the point where they can't really do much damage control. I go back to the George W. Bush DUI thing. I think it came out 2 days before the election. I would not be surprised if we do that.
And I think
Go ahead.
I think even more than whether or not it will impact the election is whether or not it will impact America going forward. And I think the fact that it will hit moderates and independents and kind of the politically apathetic or uninvolved in the way that most Americans coast through life apolitical or relatively apolitical, not understanding that the media is a biased entity, that it does have its own biases because they don't want to speak about those biases, unlike kind of your more new media figures do kind of address the fact that we have a bias, we come from this worldview, we're trying to present the truth to you, but we do have a bias. The establishment media doesn't do that, and every time that they fail to ask the important questions and they fail to address the important topics, they 100% undermine their credibility to the people that they require it from the most, the people who don't actually care that much about politics. They just need a quick, hey, what's the answer to this?
Yeah, and you guys have all heard me say, I don't know that anybody sees this coverage and says, well, I was going to vote for Joe Biden, but now I'm voting for Donald Trump. I don't know that anybody's switching like that. Yep. I do think it's possible that people see this coverage and go, well, I was going to vote for Joe Biden, but now I don't think I'm going to vote for anybody. Like, he doesn't seem to be any better than anybody else. Yep. And to Josh's point, which I think is a really good one, if the election is as close as the media would want us to believe, actually they don't want us to believe it's close. They want us to believe Biden's already won in a landslide. But if it is really going to be close, if it's going to come down to as it did in 2016, a few 10,000s of votes in a couple of key states, maybe it's enough. Maybe it's enough to move that pendulum.
We talked about this a little bit in the context of 2016. There are so many things that were enough. There's not going to be an enormous thing that sways this. I don't think it's going to be a whole lot of little things, and maybe it's a question of who has the most little things going into this. And and I don't know what else. I mean, they could be sitting on an October surprise or a super late October surprise for Trump. I'm not sure what it could be.
You think the left?
Could be
yeah.
So I'm not sure what it could
Trump's
be.
such a known.
Yeah.
It's hard. An October surprise against incumbent, I think, is really problematic. It's not
They would
impossible.
have already,
they would have used it 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's not
And
going
there's
to be the access
so
all, I would
much still sitting in the Hunter Biden troves that we don't know about. That it'll be interesting to see what comes
I know
out.
we have to. I know we're short on time in this segment. I do want to say I think it could impact some voters. I worry, though. You said it's a complicated narrative. It's very complicated. There are a lot of moving pieces. To understand one thing, you have to understand sort of all the things that came before it.
Yeah.
And I am concerned that it's something that is really big to conservatives and people sort of in that in that spectrum.
Yeah.
But that it's not something, because the media is trying not to cover it, and big tech, I think, is censoring it. There's no doubt of that. But it's not something that moderate, independent voters are seeing. Obviously, the left doesn't care about it. But I don't know that the people in the center, it's going to influence them that much because, they already knew, everyone knew that Hunter Biden was, trading off his dad's influence, or at least trying to, right?
And who wouldn't?
And
in that
they may
circumstance?
see it because it's such a complicated narrative as, yes, we already knew Hunter Biden was kind of a sleazy dude,
right.
but this narrative, I don't really see enough evidence. There's this Bobulinski guy. Yes, he seems like a credible witness. You know who else seemed like a credible witness? I'm not saying this to dispel anything that Bobulinski said.
we go. You're going
But-
to defend the
Drift.
No. Dr. Christine Blasey
Blasey
Ford
Ford, oh my goodness.
sounded like a credible witness, and I think all of us would
No.
agree that Brett Kavanaugh was railroaded by the left. So the point is, you can't really. I'm not defending the left. All I'm saying is that it's a complicated narrative, and people in the center may not buy into it.
That was
Okay,
a last
stop.
minute surprise.
Well, I can't let that go unanswered. Then we're going to get to you. The one big difference, and I would agree with you, Joe, sort of in a vacuum, that Dr. Ford, if you just listen to her talk,
Right.
she doesn't sound like she's crazy.
I'm not saying
She doesn't sound
Bobulinski's
like
wrong,
she's more. No, I know you're not. The one big difference between those two that I would point out, though, is that Bobulinski has a lot to lose from this, and no prior record of any sort of political involvement. In fact, the only reports I've seen about his prior political giving, for instance, have all been to Democrats.
Yeah.
Ford's history was not that clean, right? I mean, she had made statements in the past about abortion and how it
She's a
would make
liberal.
it would make very much sense for her not to want somebody like
That makes
Brett
sense.
Kavanaugh
Yeah.
on the bench. So I think those two. If you're just looking at them talk and saying, are they equally credible? Yeah, I would give you that. But if you dig a little deeper, I would have
I'm
to
not saying
disagree
one
with
person's
that
wrong. The
statement.
point I'm just
Yeah.
trying to make
No,
basically is I'm not sure that people in the center see this.
I don't think you're
and
wrong about
have
that.
their opinions changed.
I don't
by
think
it.
you're wrong
That's
about
not. I agree with you. I don't think if opinions get changed, I agree. I don't think it's the Hunter Biden thing. I think it's the cover up from the media. That's
Yeah,
what
I'd
will
agree with
interest
that, too.
people.
Yeah.
Okay, quickly talking about influencing people, groups of voters. Outspoken Christians have been big supporters of Trump for from the beginning, sometimes before the beginning.
Yeah, I think evangelicals voted 4-1 for Trump in 2016.
Yeah, and that's even a watered down. Evangelicals are even more watered down than they used to be. So, a pretty prominent Christian pastor and thinker and author, John Piper, came out with a piece. I think it was earlier this week, if not late last week, called "Pondering the Implications of the 2020 Election." In it, Piper does not say who he's going to vote for, but he builds the case that that Christians supporting Trump are not necessarily taking into account the damage that Trump's character flaws might have on society in general. In a vacuum, that's not a bad argument. Let me read a piece from Piper's piece. I find it bewildering that Christians can be so sure that greater damage will be done by bad judges, bad laws, and bad policies. Here he's talking about things that would be executed by the left. Than is being done by the culture-infecting spread of the gangrene of sinful self-exaltation and boasting and strife-stirring. First off, just as an aside, I guess that presumes that self-exaltation, boasting, and strife-stirring are only occurring from Trump, and there are few people more sanctimonious than the left. Hard to say if you don't vote for me, you're not black, and that not be some sort of boastful claim. Strife-stirring, calling the left the light, calling conservatives the darkness. These are not. Piper's clearly only focused on the shortcomings of conservative of Trump
Donald
himself,
Trump specifically. Yeah.
himself. So I have a super quick set of questions here. I think Piper's contending that the church, instead of worrying about politics, should basically just be worried about souls. First off, is that the case? Secondly, I think Piper would argue that Christians do need to try to alleviate suffering where they can. I suspect Piper would never say anything against individual charity, helping individual people. Sure. Is it somehow more virtuous to stop suffering on the individual level than it is to stop it on a large-scale level? Which is to say, is there something not valuable about stopping leftism, which killed 100 million people in the 20th century, that put millions of people in gulags, that killed 6 million Jews? You can say that Nazism was from the right. It's immaterial. It's statist. It's authoritarian. Are those things somehow less morally virtuous than it seems to me that conservatives trying to stop that are actually doing a very good thing.
Can I take a stab at your first question?
Yeah, please.
In terms of the church's job when it comes to politics, I do think that the church needs to care a little bit less about politics. And yes, it is their job to win souls and not to get involved in who wins elections. Now, remember, as the church, we have a big open tent. We do not make it, and by that I do not mean we do not have beliefs. We have beliefs. If you believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, then you are part of the church, and if you live your life that way, you are saved. Mm-hmm. But there are open-fisted things and closed-fisted things as a Christian. So if you believe those things, you're a Christian. Can you be pro-abortion and be a Christian? I would say yes, so. Can you be pro-illegal immigration and be a Christian? Yes. The fact that if you use the church as a way to say, we will support Donald Trump, or we will support Joe Biden, or we will support conservatism or liberalism, I don't think that's the church's job. The church's job is to win people for Jesus. And there's other people's jobs who will attract people to, there's other people's jobs to campaign for political office and to do whatever. The church's job is to make disciples and to plant churches, and it's not to endorse one political belief or another. Yes, it's the church's job to fight for pro-life things like being involved in charities and pregnancy crisis centers and all of those things. It's not the church's job to get involved with politics.
Well, I was going to say something, but the look on George's face, he's got to speak. I want to hear what he says.
I think there's a false dichotomy. I think what Piper set up, and I have, for the record, I have a great deal of respect for John Piper.
I have a moderate amount of respect for John Piper.
He's a very smart Christian thinker. He's a very loving man, I think, great moral character. If you read Wayne Grudem's response to Piper's article, Grudem's probably the best-known Reformed theologian in the country right now, I would think. He wrote a response to this, tore it apart, sent the response to Piper before it was published, and Piper sent it back to him and said, no, I think you've articulated my position clearly, but here's a way to make one of your arguments stronger. That's pretty
awesome.
Impressive in my opinion. But I think Piper is setting up a dichotomy between going after souls and working in politics. I think that's a false dichotomy. And one of the primary reasons why I think it's a false dichotomy is if you let the left win in the political sphere, your ability to go after those souls will be seriously compromised. And so I think the church not only has an openness, I don't think there's just a opportunity for the church to speak into the political realm. I think it's absolutely required for the church. The mandate of the church was never intended to be a suicide pact. The church should fight for the right of its organizations, and by church I mean capital C, the big Christian church, should be fighting for the right of individual congregations, of Christian ministries, and of individual Christians themselves to speak plainly about their faith, to win converts, to do that even in uncomfortable situations, to exercise their rights of worship, freedom of speech, and to say no, the church shouldn't be doing that, but individual church members should be. So I think it's just
quickly, Andrew,
weaseling on that question.
It seems to me, I agree with you, and it seems to me if the church, if members of the church saw a homeless man being beaten to a pulp, they would have an obligation to try to stop that.
Yes.
Sure.
I would think so. It's not clear to me why that is particularly virtuous, yet trying to stop that on a large-scale level is somehow not virtuous. Now, Piper's not wrong that some of the character traits displayed by Trump, and plenty of people in the conservative camp, are not good.
Literally
this
all
is
the
true.
people in the conservative camp display bad character.
But the
everyone in the
problem,
world.
the problem is, who else do you get?
Right.
Who
That's
is
right.
It was Milton Friedman's great question. Where is this great candidate? Where is this great paradise that you keep talking about? Yeah, you're right, Piper. You're right.
That was part of Gruden's point. Yeah.
we exactly. Heaven is not for this world was more or less what Friedman would say. Go ahead.
But he kicks his own argument off the cliff at the end, talking about the climate that's fostered by this president. I've spoken about this on numerous occasions. I probably, in the newsroom, am one of the more...
Yeah, but we don't listen to you in the newsroom, Andrew.
One of the more... what's the word I'm looking for?
Cultural hegemony.
That's only going to work once per show.
One of the more critical people when it comes to this president. But at the end of the day, whether I think that his character influences the general dialogue in this country more than creating a climate in which people can't actually go and worship or go and spread their faith and talk about matters of faith and believe their faith as it is written in the Bible, like the actual biblical faith, not the nice, it's all love, free love,
God
faith
is love,
that is
happy.
modern. And so I think in that sense, even getting at the idea of climate, you've killed your own argument.
Grudem actually makes a similar point. He says that Trump's affects the opposite of what Piper says it is. Piper's concerned that people emulate Trump. They see Trump's boastfulness and go, yeah, I want some of that. Yes. Nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
Literally what the church is saying is, don't be like that, but I'm going to vote for you. I mean, that's literally what the church is saying. So it's actually, you could argue, and Grudem does, it has the opposite effect of having Christians argue against those negatives that we all see in Donald Trump. We all see the boastfulness, the pride, whatever.
And I think it's truly outrageous. And if Piper wants to come on and visit with us, that would be
that'd be
wonderful.
amazing.
We would love to. But I think it is truly
Or Molly Hemingway,
outrageous.
if she wanted to come on, that would be good too.
It is truly outrageous for Piper to look at someone who has probably used the most uniting rhetoric on race that we have seen. We may have never seen such uniting rhetoric on race. For Piper to take that guy, point to him, and say he's being divisive, when it is the left that's coming in and calling anybody who agrees with this rhetoric about uniting the country, calling those people racist, that is outrageous on Piper's part. And I think maybe it's a function of him simply not paying close enough attention to what's happening in politics. I don't know. I know George has got a section.
Let me say one final thing. John Piper didn't endorse Joe Biden. He also didn't endorse Donald Trump. So let me ask you, Josh, was it his job to endorse Donald Trump?
No.
Well, what should he have done then?
I would contextualize things. This is a ridiculous. This is an absolutely absurd piece that assumes that the other side. Now, he does take into account, hilariously or tragically, in my opinion, that abortion is bad. But his argument is that is abortion really as bad as unrepentant sexual immorality, unrepentant boastfulness, unrepentant vulgarity, unrepentant facetiousness? Seriously, I missed that line. And yeah, abortion absolutely. It is worse than that.
He argues,
it is worse than
he
that.
literally argues that pride leads to abortion.
Well, he's
which is
saying
the-
pride leads to
not-
death and abortion is death. So whatever you're ending up with, it's still death.
All sin leads to death.
Right.
But that's a very abstract reality. The reality is that abortion doesn't come from pride. Abortion comes from selfishness. It comes from the desire and lust, the desire to have sex with anyone I want with no consequences.
I
That's
100%
where it comes
agree.
from.
But
If you want to talk about the role of the church, Joe, the idea that I agree, the church's role is not to endorse a candidate one way or the other, but if we want to talk about a role, then the role you want to have in the political dialogue, you need to contribute something to the dialogue. He just brought to the table the same argument that's been made about Donald Trump for 4 years by everyone else.
That's true.
And if the church
good
is going to
point.
take a jump and get involved right now, then why not contribute something new to the discourse? I don't think this is new. I think it's been done before.
It's also not clear to me that there was a very quick response to the question you asked. Is it the church's responsibility to endorse a candidate? And you feel everybody at the table kind of recoil from that, except me. It's not clear that that's never the church's job. If you've got a Satanist up there who wants to kill 5-year-olds, and we're kind of close to that.
let me.
It's not that the church. It's not that the church should not endorse. It's that it may not be
Necessary.
It may not be necessary every time. Yes. I don't see how, though. So I can't remember the I think it was a theologian who made the point. If you're okay with somebody who's pro-abortion in office, you got to ask yourself, are you okay with somebody who's okay with killing 5-year-olds?
Right.
But
in
at what
office?
point does it become okay?
And I need to go back to this point, and it's something that you brought up. If you look at what's happened since Roe v. Wade, the abortion rate has, thank God, gone down. It went down over Bush, it went down over Obama, and it's going down over Trump. So how much of an impact does a president really have on the abortion rate? I do think.
Well,
it's
I don't
sort of
know.
something you have to think about.
Making nuns
But
carry
the
out
abortion
abortion is
rate
probably not a
itself,
good thing.
No, the abortion rate itself. What kind of an impact will Trump's policies, and he is pro-life, and that is great. What kind of impact is he having on the actual number of babies who are murdered inside of the womb?
Okay,
Not
but,
that much.
but then you have to ask the opposite question,
Exactly.
Joe, because the argument Piper's making is that his boastfulness is having a huge impact. How much impact is Donald Trump's boastfulness having on American
The everyday
culture?
American, yeah.
Zero.
None.
Absolutely zero. None at all.
I think that's because it's
maybe the opposite.
his boastfulness is. I mean, we're all boastful as Americans. That's something that
Right.
is already a problem that
Right.
we. That
So
we deal
Piper
with.
is saying either go for abortion, go for pro-life, or go for pro-non-boastfulness. That's a silly choice, in my opinion. Since boastfulness isn't an issue, let's go after the issue that is an issue, which is murdering infants.
I think he's just trying to say that, as you said, sin leads to death, and all of these are sins, and eventually they will all lead to death.
Which is that's totally accurate.
That is accurate, but I don't think that's what he's saying. He says, I find it bewildering that Christians can be so sure that greater damage will be done by bad judges, bad laws, bad policies than being done by by the culture infecting spread of gangrene of sinful behavior. He is clearly creating a hierarchy here where the things the orange man does are worse than the things that that the left does,
Which actually disrupts the church.
That's an enormous problem, and I
think that's a huge problem.
I don't know if Piper realizes that's what he's doing. I don't know how you could write this and not realize that's what you're doing. And to me, to the extent that he says this is, he said this is as close as I'm going to come to saying who I'm voting for. If you create the hierarchy he created, he has to vote for Biden.
I think he actually said he's not going to vote for either one.
He said he's writing someone in.
Yeah, I think he's going to write somebody in.
Well, that's a good question, too. Who is the incredibly virtuous person? Who is the person
John
he's
Piper?
going to write
I don't
in?
know.
Exact.
Kanye West.
No, John Piper. Seriously. I mean, yeah.
That's what he's.
Yeah.
To me, that's what he seems to be setting up. And that's why I didn't like this piece. Although I usually like
so
much
arrogant.
of what Piper writes.
Incredibly arrogant.
This one sounded like the only person I could vote for is me, which really bothered me.
And so,
So does this mean, Joe, that Trump has had a lasting effect on the Republican Party?
Well, that leads into my last
Good
segment,
question.
and we are so close to out of time. But I will say
we can
I will
edit
ask
out
you a
Andrew's
question.
segment.
We
Yeah.
can always do that.
Yeah.
So, it's not something that conservatives want to think about, right? What happens if Donald Trump loses? I don't know who's going to win the election. It probably will be very close, but there's a chance that Trump loses. As there is with any election, there's one candidate is not going to win.
Sure.
So if Donald Trump loses, he has obviously made a huge impact on the Republican Party of today. The Republican Party of today is pro-America first, which means they go against the traditional hawkish foreign policy views of the Republican establishment of years past, the neoconservatism. They are pro-fair trade, what they would say fair trade over free trade, and they are pro just protecting American businesses. It's very nationalistic. Nationalism, patriotism.
A narrow drawing
whatever
of
you want
American
to say.
interests.
Right.
Yeah.
So if Trump loses, and I will just ask all of you to go down the line and say, who do you think you could see as the GOP nominee and vice presidential nominee? So the
You mean in
ticket
2024?
in 2024. Who do you think it could be? And maybe explain it in a few seconds why.
I think I want to take this one first because it's something we've discussed off screen
Right.
a number of times. I think that whether Trump wins or loses, it's a discussion that we need to have, and we're either going to have it right away,
or
or we're
delay
going to
it
have it
4
in 4
years.
years
Yeah.
when we actually have to pick a candidate.
Yeah.
And I would like to see an amalgamation. I would like to see a little bit more of the conservatism of old, a little bit more poise, a little bit more politicking, because I think that you get more done sometimes. I think that sometimes when you can actually create coalitions and not
A softer hand.
a little bit of a softer hand. But I still like the grit, and I like some of the things that this president has brought to the table in terms of non-interventionism all over the world, particularly in the Middle East militarily.
Yeah.
I like the America First policy in terms of trade. So I would personally like to see someone like a Nikki Haley, a Kristi Noem, Senator Scott. I think any of those folks would be fantastic because I think they have a little bit of the bite that this president brings with a little bit more of a fair-handed approach to things.
So in an ideal world, I would agree with you. I don't know that we live in that world anymore. And my concern is that when you come with the softer hand, you have to be approaching somebody who is greeting you with that softer hand, or your hand
faith.
gets slapped. Okay. And I don't know. I have never seen the left like this before in my life. I've never seen them the way they are today. I don't know that they can come back to an approach that is amenable to that, and I don't know if they will come back if they can. So I have great concern about somebody who isn't coming with a firm hand. I don't know that we need, Donald Trump Jr. And I don't mean that literally. I don't mean Donald J. Trump Jr. I just mean Trump light. I don't know that we need another Donald Trump, in other words. But I would be very concerned about when I hear people say, going back to kind of that softer approach or a more mainstream approach, the people most likely to do that are going to be establishment figures. And I think the Republican Party is damned for eternity if we do that. However, I'll also say this. If Donald Trump doesn't win this election, I think it may be a moot point because precisely because of where I think the left is, where the Republican Party, where the Democrat Party is right now. I don't think they will do anything over the next 4 years other than put in place whatever they can put in place to keep Republicans from having a chance to win ever again. I think you'll be looking at Puerto Rican statehood. I think you'll be looking at D.C. statehood. I think you'll be looking at statehood for American Samoa or wherever they can find to talk about packing the Supreme Court, which they'll do.
Proportional representation
I think
in the
they'll
Senate.
pack the Senate.
Yep.
I think they'll redistrict the House. So based on the 2020 census, whoever's in authority is going to be able to do that. So I think the question might actually be moot. I think if Republicans don't win this time around, they might never win again.
That I agree with that, George, and that's the thing that truly worries me. And I'm not so much worried about leftist economic policy that might get put in place and those things. What I'm worried about, you and I have talked about this before, is if they do go to proportional representation in the Senate, which the Atlantic and at least one other national publication are talking about. If they do, of course they wait, yeah, we can talk about that later. If they do pack the courts, which it's clear they're going to, they will gerrymander, and if they bring in states, they'll also, the thing you didn't mention is they'll try to render the EC useless, the Electoral College useless.
Oh, yes.
At that point, I'm not worried about economic policy. I'm not even worried about social policy at that point. I'm worried about the integrity of the republic.
That's exactly right.
I don't see how red states that are productive and growing, I don't see how they stay in if they become essentially vassal states who are also saddled with national debt, who also provide the vast majority of the soldiers that defend the country, who are paying enormous amounts in federal income taxes. I don't see how the republic is an attractive proposition to them at that point. And that's what really scares me about all of this. I'm not that scared of Biden's policies. If we can regain control, we can reverse some of those. I'm worried about never regaining control again.
Yep. Breaking: Josh Manning calls for secession.
Not calling for, fearing. No, I posted something similar to this online, and somebody said, ginning for a civil war is not helpful. I said, I'm not ginning. I'm warning. This is not. I don't see a scenario where states that have been marginalized and basically turned into vassal states, I see no reason for them to want to stay in the republic, especially if they're in the interior of the country.
There's also no
international threat to them.
There's also no particular reason to believe that inexorably leads to civil war.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
There's no reason to believe there cannot be peaceful secession, which I am also not ginning for or advocating. I'm just saying it's a possibility. People talk about peace or civil war; those are the options. No, there are other options.
Right, and we like the republic. I like being an American.
Like it is. Yes,
I want the experiments to continue. Right. Exactly, I want the experiment to continue. I want to be able to keep it. It's not clear that we're going to be able to. The Declaration deals with the circumstances under which that's kind of foolish.
All right, we are.
All right, we're way
past time, and we still have one very important segment.
Maybe our most important.
Maybe the most important segment we've ever done.
And we just talked about secession.
That we've been ordered by our producer to do. We actually don't have any idea what's in this segment, other than it's called "Spooky Stories from the Biden Campaign," and therefore I assume it's related to Halloween in some way. But we were given these secret envelopes with our names on them, with cards on them.
Don't open it yet. You're not supposed to open it yet.
I didn't open it.
Joe, did you open your?
I didn't open my.
All right,
freaking libertarians,
so
rebellious.
They don't pay attention to the rules. So, who has number 1 on their envelope?
Of course it's me.
Of course
number
it's
one
Andrew.
in our hearts.
Number 1 in our hearts, Andrew J.
We have to make a quick
sorry.
production change here
is
too.
Coming too. Okay, this is.
Hold on.
This is terrifying.
Hold on.
Mood lighting. We're gonna do
Some of
mood
us are
lighting.
afraid of the dark.
I'll hold your hand, Joe. If
Thank
you.
you.
Need me to. That was not an invitation to try to hold
sure?
my hand. Just to be clear.
I think it's incredibly fitting that I have number 1 because I love to cut in on conversation with jokes that don't
that no one likes.
This is our producer. Our
going to
producer
love
is going
this.
to ridiculous lengths
Wait
to
a
not
minute,
be on
those were
camera right
jokes?
now.
I had no idea.
Oh, they're
you were
jokes every
telling
time. I don't really speak anything serious.
Wow. Okay. Andrew has jokes. I never knew.
This is what's happening off camera. It's the most ridiculous thing
Our producer,
I have
Kayla
ever
Kunkel,
seen.
is literally crawling on the floor to adjust lighting. Next time we're going to need a camera like back here to capture that. But,
Follow her on
okay.
Twitter, Kayla Kunkel.
That's right.
That's not her handle. I don't remember what her handle is, but you can find her if you search Kayla Kunkel on
you
Twitter.
know what? Go ahead and read, Andrew, and I'm going to just go ahead and find Kayla Kunkel's Twitter.
A crestfallen Joseph Robinette Biden took to the stage, head hanging in shame. And no, it's not because his middle name sounds like Batman's sidekick. Tears began welling up as he prepared to share the devastating news. 210 million people are dead from the coronavirus, he began. All of a sudden, an insidious smile crept onto his haggard face. And they all voted for me!
right, number 2.
I'm number 2.
Oh, I like
Yes,
that.
you are.
I hope mine's that good.
The big bad Trump visited a house made of straw. He huffed and he puffed and he blew it all down. Nancy Pelosi ran away into the night. Then the big bad Trump went into a house made of stone. He huffed and he puffed and he blew it all down. Kamala Harris ran into the night. Finally, the big bad Trump went to a house made of brick. He huffed and he puffed and he blew it all down. Joe Biden
That's some
was
huffing and
nowhere
puffing.
to be seen. And on night, he was... Oh, right. He was in the basement.
Some onomatopoeia going on there.
It was.
Puffed. Puffed.
I have number 3. All right, I can see how this is a serious horror story. I'm going to look in the camera for dramatic effect. You ready? I hope our director, Kobe Barlucci, is ready for me for a camera stare for the dramatic effect. Trump wins.
Dun dun dun.
Or, actually, let me try that with a Dracula accent. Maybe that would be,
Trump wins.
yes.
Trump wins.
You know, I can't even do it. Go ahead, John.
It's a cold and dark night on November 3rd.
Is he Batman?
Amid the star space, it's a storm coming. Where's Rachel?
Yeah. He's Batman. Okay.
It's a cold and dark night on November 3rd. Amid the star-spangled streamers, reading Biden-Harris 2020, an elderly man with wisps of white hair sits alone in the middle of a campaign office, head drooped. He looks almost dead, like mummified remains twisting in the wind. It's a windy office. But there's a faint glimmer of life. His hand seems to be moving, but it's not his hand. It's his phone alerting him that he has unread messages. There's just one message
one
message he
messages?
read. The mail-in ballots were properly counted. Trump wins.
Yeah. Trump
Oh,
wins.
that was scary.
Blah, blah.
Blood.
All right. That is more than we had for you today. Thank you for watching. It's
our longest podcast ever. Sorry.
By far our longest
Good
podcast ever. I don't know whether to thank you for staying with us, to congratulate you for your persistence,
Or to apologize.
or to apologize for Andrew mostly. But we are very grateful that you've been with us today on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Program note for next week that I will almost certainly do wrong. We will be covering the election live on Tuesday, beginning not at our normal scheduled time, but at 3:30 Pacific time, 6:30 Eastern time.
Joe Biden on a telephone.
Get that right. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm doing. Let me look at my notes here. So normally we're here at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is not going to be the case on Tuesday. We will not be here at 2 p.m. We'll be here instead at 6:30 Eastern and 3:30 Pacific, and then we're going to be here all night. We'll be here hopefully long enough to call the election. We'll see what happens on Tuesday, but we'll have a number of very special guests coming on as well to help us analyze the results and give you up-to-date information regarding election returns that night. And then we will be doing our normal show, but we'll do it Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday next week. That will be at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And we will be doing that all 3 days because we're assuming that there's going to be plenty of post-election day news to cover, whether that's additional states to call as mail-in ballots are counted. Maybe that's about violence or other reactions to the election. We'll just have to wait and see. But we know there's going to be news that week, and we want to bring it to you live. So that's going to be 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on YouTube, on Facebook, on on westernjournal.com. All three of those. We really encourage you to go and find WJ Live on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. Click that bell so that you get notifications when our newest episodes go up, because you're not going to want to miss any of this coverage. The mainstream media is going to slant this as slanted as they can slant it next week. We're going to give you the truth as best as we can see it and determine it and communicate it to you. So if you want the truth on election night, you want to be right here on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. We'll see you then.
Hey guys, thank you for joining us today. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can catch each episode live on our YouTube channel. If you're joining us on YouTube, click on the subscribe button below or check out past episodes over here. And if you liked today's episode, make sure to give us a thumbs up below or leave a comment. It really helps us out. Thank you again for joining us, and we can't wait to see you again on the next episode of WJ Live.